Hello and welcome to All Walks of Life. My guest on the show today is Syed Yusuf Shahab, an author and historian who speaks to me about his new book, The Lost Sufis of Delhi, which is now available to purchase on Amazon. In this conversation, we delve into topics which are covered in his book, such as Sufism, how Sufism started in India, how Sufi cultures are still present around us, and lost ruins in the sense that the ASI hasn't been taking good care of them, and there are still these Sufi monuments, this architecture, which is being discovered each and every day in Delhi in most aspects. Other than that, we also looked at his organization, Sere Delhi, which is a heritage walk organization which goes to places in Delhi which aren't picked up by the general media. When I was speaking to Yusuf, I got lost in his world of Sufism and heritage, and I think you will too once you hear him speak. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Yusuf. Hey Yusuf, welcome to the All Walks of Life podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much.
So, just tell everybody about your new book right away, I guess, because that's the place to start. So, what's the new book about?
So that's it's my first book, and it is known as the Lost Sufis of Delhi. So this book I have completed in a span of 5 months time, and it's all about the all forgotten Sufis of Delhi. Mainly, we people know that Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia's shrine is very much famous in Delhi, and many people, I think, 1,000 people every day visits in before Corona era. So I thought, what is the need of doing such an important thing in this field? So I have started an organization way back in 2018. It was Sare Delhi, and it is still now functioning. So while I was doing Sare Delhi, and in Sare Delhi we do heritage walks. So we have traced many unnoticed and discarded shrines. So a pull came inside me to why not pen down about those holy shrines on a book, on a notebook. So when lockdown happened in March, so I decided to write, because my research work was started from 2018 only. So in 5 months time I have written all about those Sufi shrines, and eventually I published it by a publisher. So that's how my book got the name The Lost Sufis of Delhi, and just tomorrow only it got released on all e-commerce website.
That's fantastic stuff. Just before we dive deep into, let's say, Sufism and your book as it is, let's give me a background of your intellectual journey. So, where you went to school and how you basically got into being interested about, let's say, ruins and historical sites in that sense.
Uh, I basically belong from Patna, the capital of Bihar. I was born there only. So the thing is that I belong to a family which already follows the path of Sufism, and in my family also there are many Sufi saints. If I talk in between 13th to 19th century, there are many Sufi saints who were born in my family. So from my grandfathers and great grandfather, in my family we have listened about many Sufi shrines all over in India, and Delhi is known as the Hazrat-e Dilli, because Hazrat is a word used for a Sufi saint. So Delhi has so many Sufi shrines. That is why you have heard about a book known as 32 Khajaon ki Chaukhat. Delhi is known as 32 Sufi saints who are very much famous in Delhi. So that's how I got a pull from my family member also. So I started to explore. And when I came to Delhi in way back in 2001, I got admission in Hamdard Public School at this standard third, and I have done entire my schooling from Hamdard Public School. And Hamdard Public School is very near to the Tughlaqabad Fort. So when I go to my school, I have seen many times Tughlaqabad. So I was determining why this fort is so much empty and nobody visits it. And when I visit to Red Fort, I see lots of people go to Red Fort. So from that moment only, there is a pull came inside me to just visit those shrines which are truly discarded. Nobody goes. And when I came into the graduation, I have done my graduation from Jamia Millia Islamia in the subject of political science. But I have a keen interest in history also. From my graduation era, I started to explore slowly, and when I came to my postgraduate, I have done my postgraduate in tourism and travel. So in that field, I have to visit many places. So that's how in 2017 I took admission, and I totally made my focus on visiting, especially the unnoticed shrines, and that's how I have traced many unnoticed heritage and Sufi shrines.
Right. So I'd say many people would be not aware as it is what actually a shrine is, or what Sufi culture is, Sufism is. So would you mind defining that in the way you can, maybe?
Well, Sufis are not like normal human beings. They are human beings, but their qualities and their attributes, you can say their nature, their temperaments are not like human beings, normal human beings. I can say that. So when they are thus chosen by the God, so they are known as so their field is known as tasawwuf. Tasawwuf is known as the friendship with God. So they are so much enlightened by the God. So have they have done very good work in the path of spirituality and mysticism. So that's why they are known as Sufi. In if I talk the Sufi word in Urdu, we will say that we can call them as a wali. We can call them wali in Urdu. So they have a very high rank, and entire life they do, or in their entire life they only do sacrifice for making everybody surrounded by them, to make them happy. So that's why you have listened the term Urs. The Urs ceremony happens at a Sufi shrine. That's the gift to the Sufi saint. It is said that when Sufi saint dies, God gifts them that death. So after their death, they have granted them the very high status in the paradise. So that is why the Urs is celebrated. So these Sufi saints, as I've talked, these Sufi saints all time have sacrificed their life for doing well-being for the humans around them. So not only humans, but all the living beings, I can say, whether that is plants or animals, whichever has a life. Yeah, so conscious. So that is why they have done so. Till now, after they're dead, they're dead. So they are now having name in the entire India, or you can say as Indian subcontinent.
Right. So when we look at Sufis, as you mentioned that they still have a name, and that's originating in India and other parts of Central Asia as well. But are there still Sufis around in Delhi, in let's say other parts of India, that people still visit? People still let's say renowned for that process? Are there still Sufis around, or it's probably long gone?
Sufis, and this question of yours, I have to go to some historical points. So, Sufism is from the Holy Prophet of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad. So, Prophet Muhammad is the last messenger of Islam, and Prophet Muhammad is the 1,24,000 messenger. There are 1,24,000. He is the last messenger. After that, there are four caliphs in Islam. First is Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq, then Hazrat Umar Farooq, then Hazrat Usman Ghani, and last is the Hazrat Ali Karmallah Wajho, which we know as Maula Ali. You have to listen many qawwalis in the name of Maula Ali. So after that only the Sufism started. So there was a disciple of that man, Hazrat Ali. His name was Hazrat Khwaja Hasan Basri. From that person only the entire Sufism started and spread it all over Central Asia. So in 12th century, 11th and 12th century, the places like Samarkand, Uzbekistan is only the Samarkand, Bukhara, Tashkent, Kyrgyzstan, Osh, Fargana. These were the abode of Sufi saints. And from here only the spiritual institutions happened everywhere. So what happened in 12th century? As you know, there are notorious criminals known as Mongols. So Mongols started invaded that places. So without their will, they have to leave those places and came to Indian subcontinent, and they started preaching this thing in Indian subcontinent, which what we know as Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh right now. So that's how they started preaching, and till now that process is happening in India and Indian subcontinent. So currently there are Sufi saints. There are still alive Sufi saints, but it's upon us to find them. They will not come to you and say that we are a Sufi. I have a Sufi master. My Sufi master says that Sufis are found between two lies. The first lie is that there will be a man who will say, I have very much knowledge, but he is nothing from inside. And one man is that who has everything from inside, but he will not say that I have that much knowledge. So in that two lies, there you can find a Sufi. So the second lie is the man is saying is the real Sufi. So it's upon us to find him. That he will not come to us.
Being a Hindu myself, I think that's very much prominent in the aspect of yogis in Hinduism. That someone that there's a lot of yogis who come out on social media, and even when we meet in person, who'd say that, oh, show me your hand, show me this, show me that, and if you come under my whatever the thing is, that I will show you a better way of living life. But someone who actually believes in this way of yogic tradition and Hindu tradition may not come out as you are mentioning. So yeah, I think it just boils down to that. But when we are talking about Sufis in that sense, what are some of the things they have to go through? What is their procedure? So as you said, you have a Sufi master. So what are the things he teaches you or she teaches you?
First of all, how the enlightenment came to a Sufi. So the thing happens that God has made human being with soil, as everybody knows. So in our body there are three things He has put it. One is our mind, second is our body, and the third thing is our soul. So these three things are interconnected with each other. So what happened? A normal human being work with all these three factors. But a Sufi's soul is detached from these two things, that are body and mind. So what happened? A normal human being always think about his future and his past, that what happened. But Sufi lives only in present, because his soul is attached. And what mind shows to a soul only absorb that thing only. So Sufi's souls are detached from their bodies. So this process is known as fana. And what body remains is known as baka. These are very important two words in Sufism, fana and baka. So this process is known as fana.
So wait, baka means that you are still in, let's say...
You are still here, but your soul is from elsewhere. You have listened Maulana Rom, Jalaluddin Rumi. We say Maulana Rom in Urdu to that Rumi. So this process he is describing fana and baka, that our soul is from elsewhere. There's a very famous quote you can find in the social media or internet, Google. So this quote is upon this thing only, because Sufi souls are gone to elsewhere. Their body and mind are still present here, but their soul is attached to the God. So they have detached their souls from their minds and their body. So that's how Sufi spiritual awakening starts to happen. After that, when this thing happens, they will search for a spiritual master. And without a spiritual master, nobody can successfully walk on this path. He will abandon this path at any moment if he don't have that Sufi, because there is lots of sacrifice in this path. So that's how Sufism journey starts.
So, sorry to come back to Hinduism, but being a Hindu, that's like my only, let's say, takeaway in that sense. But so when I speak to my mother about Hinduism, and I read, let's say, I read the Bhagavad Gita, and it's always talking about this whole very similar essence, in that sense that the world we live in right now is very material, and there's a world after this, and the only way you can reach that is by letting go of your possessions, is by letting go of, let's say, having attachments in this life, so that you can, let's say, be connected to Krishna, connected to God in that sense. Do you see similarities in other traditions of reaching a similar goal, be it through different means in Hinduism or Christianity?
Yeah, and there is, as you can see, Sufi only search for one God. There is a one God, and whatever you can call him, Allah, Krishna, Ram, Shiv, whatever. So he finds the essence of God. So how he will find? The spiritual master is there to guide him, because spiritual master has already been to this field. So what he just gives his finger and take him to the spiritual master. So there is no today, as we are seeing, therefore all are fighting on the religion. They are all whatever happening currently of Babri Masjid or Ram Temple, whatever is happening. So ultimate goal is only to the one God. There is one God who has. I'm saying the course of the Sufi only. There is only one God who has made the entire world, not entire world. You can say entire solar system or universe, and He has created. Not a single leaf can go from here and there without His will. So on that God only the Sufi believes, and he worships only that God. So you can take any mode to reach to Him. Ultimately, there is only one God. What Sufism believes.
So this is a question I've asked several of my guests really, and then it's the same essence that you're talking about. Is that if I'm Hindu, you're Muslim, someone else is Christian, doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's about connecting together to find what is, let's say, the meaning of life, what the Sufis are trying to put forward, what say the Hindus are trying to reach. But it's just that, as you mentioned, the examples of the Babri Masjid and the Hindu temple that have been recently so famously in the newspapers. It's just that everyone wants to promote their religion on top of the other. Because do you think, why do you think that is? Why do you think that I want to show that my religion is better than yours, or that only my religion is the real religion?
This topic is very deep. The thing is that I think what is the reason coming out because of because of uneducation. Because whoever is doing this thing that my religion is, they are uneducated. They are jobless. They are unemployed. They have no work to do. So when you talk about a good highly qualified person, he will not talk about this thing. He only knows, if you talk about any Hindu or you can say a Christian, Sikh, they all visit Sufi shrines and they all visit other places also. Same with the teachings of Guru Nanak. Guru Nanak, as you know, I want to add one thing. Guru Nanak was a very much good admirer of a Sufi saint known as Baba Farid. Have you heard the name of Baba Farid? No. Baba Farid is the spiritual master of Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya of Delhi, and his shrine is currently in Pakpatan. Just see, when Sikh people goes to Pakistan, they go to and they pay their homage at the holy shrine of Baba Farid in Pakpatan. And same with me. I am also a Muslim, but I regularly go to Gurudwara. I visited many Gurudwara. I have gone to Gurudwara Harminder Sahib in Amritsar. So there is nothing in disparities or fight among. But whatever currently we are doing because of less education and what I think is that because they have no work to do, so they are doing this thing. When you talk with a good person, he will not talk about this thing.
Do you think, let's say, taking the Indian context in that matter, do you think they're taking it too far at this point? Because I think you may feel this being a Muslim more, because in the news it's come out that they've basically renamed this place to Prayagraj now, because they feel that was the Hindu name before and ensure that that's the way it should be. So do you have any particular thoughts around that, and just being in this atmosphere of and living as a Muslim? Because I may say that being a Hindu right now, but I can understand that I'm not facing as much, I say, discrimination in that sense.
That's only because of they want to change the history of India. Because I don't know what the misconception came that Mughals were the very much bad criminals. But what Mughal have did for India, no one is knowing that.
Exactly.
That is why we are doing heritage walks to show the role of Mughals and Delhi Sultanate era. If you think, if Mughals, they say that Mughals were the thieves, they are known as luteras, etc., etc. If they are luteras, why have they built this fascinating Humayun's tomb, Taj Mahal, Red Fort? In 15th August, Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi will do the. So it's also Mughal fort, na? But they have given, because Mughal, after Babur, Humayun has made this land his home. And after him, Akbar has married the Rajput queen, Harkabai. Her name was not Jodha.
So it's very funny because I'm reading Iram Makhoti's Akbar, the Great Mughal right now, and she's mentioned so many times that just because it's popular, it doesn't mean that it is Jodha.
Her name was Jodha. She was from Amer, but her name was Harkabai. She was the daughter of Raja Bharmal. So Raja Bharmal came to Akbar to to have a relation of Rajput and Muslim Mughal clan. So you can see how a secular they were, but on the name of making those Mughals criminal, I don't think they are doing very good to the history, because everybody has came and ruled here. Before Delhi Sultan, there was Prithviraj Chauhan. He also ruled here, and before him, Delhi was ruled by Tomars. Tomars have built a very fascinating. There is a fort in Mehrauli which is known as Kila Lalkot. They have ruled for 300 years, but nobody is talking about them. They have done many good things in Mehrauli. But what they are doing, that they are just focusing on the Alauddin Khiljis, Aurangzeb, and etc. Because they must know that Alauddin Khilji was the one who has successfully defeated Mongols. He has done many good things. So whatever happened, we haven't seen that place. What we found from the historical source, we should not change that thing, and we should be a secular. And every God has made everybody. Everybody. When he was born, he was not a Hindu. No, he don't know he was. When he got adult, then he went to know that his parents said that you are a Muslim, you are a Hindu. So every human being is equal. I don't believe in that type of irrational in religion and making biasness in religion.
No, that's a very interesting point you touched upon. Let's say Narendra Modi there, that he will come out and criticize, let's say, the Mughals, to say that, oh look, they've taken us so much away from this country, but then again he'll happily push let's say Taj Mahal and Humayun's tomb as tourism things, so attract foreigners.
That Donald Trump came, what he wanted to visit? He wanted to visit the Taj. He wanted to visit the Humayun's tomb. These are the icons of India. If you'll destroy them, so there is no value of India.
But yeah, they won't talk about that, because the money that, like say, the Indian government gets through tourists is coming through these Mughal forts. Yeah.
Places are mostly from Taj Mahal. In Corona era, lakhs per day loss is happening because Agra there is a lockdown. When Taj Mahal happens, when I went to Taj Mahal first time in 2014, there were only 25 rupees ticket. Right now, the Taj Mahal ticket is 45 just to visit the garden area. If you go to the main grave, you have to pay 200 rupees. You just see how they are collecting the monies, and still they are abusing those Mughals who have built those.
No, I think it's very fascinating in that sense. And you touched upon Akbar there and Humayun as well. So as I mentioned, I was reading Ira Makhuti's book. So she's talked about this essence that Akbar was, let's say, one of the first people to establish this. I'm forgetting the name, but he established this place, which was an interface meeting. I think so. Okay, so he had people coming from Christianity. He had Hindu people were there. He had Muslims there. So just talk about essence such as philosophy, religion, and how we can better rule in those essences. So I think it's very short-sighted of us to, let's say, oh look, they took so much money away, so they had to be bad, and not look at the better things they'd done, because Akbar did so many good things as well. He looked at essences such as taking sati away from Hindu women and saying that, and telling Hindu men that, why are you expecting this of women to sacrifice after you? It should be well within their rights if they want to do it or not. You can't force them to do it, and things like that.
As you were talking about, he has done many things. First of all, when he married Harka Bai, he constructed a temple in Agra Fort, the prime example of his love for his wife. So he has done many things. And what I was talking about, Deen-e-Ilahi, he has combined all the religion, and it was a step to bring all the religion on one platform. So there is no disparities and no communal violence among. So he has done very a good thing of doing Deen-e-Ilahi. Unfortunately, Deen-e-Ilahi was didn't work very good, and it was over as Akbar died. So it was a step. And you are talking about the Sati system. From Sati system, one Mughal name came in my mind. His name was Akbar II. He's the second last Mughal emperor, and Akbar II is the father of Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was deported to Rangoon. So Akbar II started a very good festival of Phool Walo Ki Sair, Sair Gul Faroshan in Mehroli. It is a Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb secular festival where the flowers of Yog Maya temple. Today is the Janmashtami, festival of Janmashtami, the birth of Lord Krishna. So her sister Yog Maya's temple is 5,000 old temple established at Mehroli. It was constructed by I think so Pandavas during Mahabharata era. So in 1812 AD he started a festival of Hindu-Muslim secularism from where the flowers are offered from a temple to a dargah. There is a dargah of Khwaja Qutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki in Mehroli. He is the first Chishti Sufi of Delhi. This thing happened in September. In September only the Phool Walo Ki Sair will start. And he was the person who ascended Raja Ram Mohan Roy to England. And he gave Raja Ram Mohan Roy the title of Raja. Many of people don't know. So Raja Ram Mohan Roy is the pioneer behind stopping the sati system in India. If you go to the historical books, so he is the main man behind the stopping the sati system, because his own sister-in-law was buried in the system of sati, the ritual of sati. So Akbar II fully supported this guy to do this thing. So today everything is not telling to the people, and just communal thing are told that this person has done very bad to you in the history. So I don't know why they are doing this.
Do you think it comes down to, as you mentioned, Akbar tried as well, and then there have been so many people who have tried, Gandhi ji tried, and there's so many examples in history we can look at and turn to that have tried to, let's say, bring different cultures, different religions together, but to the most part people haven't been so successful in it. Do you think that's true, that I'm saying something like that, or do you think that there have been examples of people living in, let's say, harmony with each other?
I think so. This crop is planted. The common crop of hate was planted by the Britishers. So they have gone, but their attributes didn't gone. So what they have made to divide and rule, still in India this thing is followed. Most part of India they are doing. If I talk about before British era, before 1857, there was no such thing. In 1857 revolt, when I talk about 1857 revolt, it was started from Barakpur in Bengal. What was the issue? The issue was about the two main thing about cow and pig. They were using rifles, using what we call some parts of cow and some parts of pig. So pig is not it's haram in Islam, and cow is a holy animal for Muslims. So just they don't think. So they are doing from 1857 this type of thing, and at that revolt, all came at one platform. That Nana Saheb, Bahadur Shah Zafar, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Tarti Beg, Mangal Pandey. Why they revolted against this thing? Because they were started to dividing and ruling. So this thing it started in 1857. Still we are facing. So I think the Britishers are behind this, the reason of divide and just spread communalism amongst especially in India. That is why unfortunately Pakistan was established. I myself wanted to visit Pakistan because there are many heritage, but because of religion a country was established. So this was all because of the Britishers, from my point of view, what I think.
Because that's very interesting. So I recently read this book called Sapiens. I'm not sure if you've heard about it, by Yuval Noah Harari. It's a great book. I'd really recommend it if someone wants to know about how we've become Homo sapiens and just our journey throughout there. So he's talked about this whole essence. So he has a bit about, let's say, the British ruling around different parts of the world, and he has a particular section on India as well. So when he talked about the British in India, he said that we can often look at, let's say, these disparities that the British put forward in India. But there's something very interesting to point forward here is that even though there were only a few thousand Britishers who came in here, they knew India much more than we knew India ourselves. So they knew the historical sites, they knew the artifacts, they knew the paintings, like the art history and all those essences of India. So they first came into India, they studied all of it, and as you mentioned, then they can actually pinpoint, acha, so that cows don't go well with, let's say, Muslims, and let's say pigs don't go well with something like this, and we can do something here to conjure up something. So I think that's very important when we have to look at things, that it is essential to get down to the bottom of things in matters such as that. But to touch upon Sufism, because I guess that's the essence of this conversation I'd want to have with you. So just walk me through that journey, because you are from a Sufi background yourself. You are from a Sufi family. So how did how was experiences like that, like growing up in a Sufi family? So yeah.
As I told, I'm born in a Sufi family. So in Sufism, these are what we have taught from our childhood, that don't be harsh to anybody, because the Sufi ideology is that God has created every living being, and you have to be kind to every person. Without kindness, no one can become a Sufi, because in a simple language, my spiritual sheikh said that be kind to others, God will be kind to you. That is what Gandhiji also told, because non-violence. And if you indirectly you can say this quote is what Gandhiji has said. So without kindness you cannot become a Sufi. So Sufism, you have to be kind to every person. So from my childhood I have been from this education and this thing. I have many Hindu friends. When I talk about my Saradil, my partner Aman, he's a Hindu, but there is no disparity amongst us. We know each other very well. He's a Hindu. I go to his temple. He comes to my dargah and we visit, because that is the function of Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, the secularism. That is what is taught at the dargah and Gurudwara and temples. There is not a single religion speaks about to spreading hate amongst women. And the Sufi ideology is also same, that just give love to everybody. When you give love to someone, he will give love back to you also. So that is what I have went to this thing, and I'm very fortunate that I have got a very great spiritual master who taught me this thing at very high level, and because of him only I was able to write this book, The Lost Sufis of Delhi. Whatever knowledge he gave to me, because I didn't know anything about spirituality and mysticism, only about knowing 1-2 things. He has guided me on this path, how to work on this. I'm very thankful to that guy, and I have named his name in my book also.
So just for people who'd want to understand more about Sufism and Sufis, where do you think that is a good place to start, other than reading your book, of course? But where do you think they can? Is there particular books you'd recommend them to pick up? Is there particular places, as you mentioned, you'd like them to visit? Just how would you, let's say that if someone wants to walk this path of Sufism with you, with people who are practicing it, how do you think they can do it?
First of all, a misconception I want to clear here, that people think that visiting dargah can let them to become a Sufi. Dargah is the only place to offer Fatiha and ask for blessings. The work has to be done by that individual only. Without his hard work, he can't be a Sufi. For attaining the spiritual awakening, he had to find a suitable spiritual sheikh, spiritual master. In the course, if he is not finding right now, so there is a book written by a Sufi saint who first came to Indian subcontinent about 1000 years ago. His name was Data Ganj Bakhsh Ali Hajveri, and his holy shrine is in Lahore, Pakistan right now. It was India only before 1947. So he has written a book known as Kashful Mahjoob, and he says that the person who don't have any spiritual sheikh, this book is his master. If he thoroughly goes to that book, I have read that book sometimes, and I have used some quotes of that book in my book also. Very fascinating book. It is the step-by-step journey how a person will start enrolling in this field, and how he will go to the zenith. So if he reads that book, not only he has to follow that book, then he will definitely become a Sufi, because Data Ganj Baksh Ali Hajweri himself said, the person who don't have a spiritual sheikh, this book is his spiritual sheikh. So it was written in Persian and it's 1000-year old book, and it's the only work of Data Ganj Baksh Ali Hajweri. He has not written anything else. Many things he have written, but it was told by some person at that era.
So most of the things that come to my mind, because I've been reading Akbar as well, so is that so there's a lot of, let's say, Persian influence in aspects such as that. Do you think it is prominent in Sufi culture as well? So as you mentioned this book, so is it predominantly, so the stuff you are even reading about, you're learning about, is it predominantly in Persian and then translated into, let's say, Urdu?
First of all, that era, these Sufis were from the Central Asia, so their main language was Persian. They used to speak Persian. The era of Urdu language came nearly 1800s AD. So in 1800s AD, there were many Sufi scholars who have translated these books in Urdu. But now after 1990s or 2000 era, these books are translated in English, because as we are like an admirer of Sufism, we don't we haven't studied Urdu in our academics, because we are not belong to a Muslim school, or you can say that if we belong to a Muslim school, so we got a subject of Urdu. But that is why after 2000 era, many people are working to translate from those Urdu texts to the English text. So the main famous books of that era, if I talk about Kashful Mahjoob, there's another book written by Crown Prince, Dara Shikoh.
I was listening
Yeah.
to a podcast.
He was also a Sufi type of person. He has written two books, main two books. He has written many books. He has converted Upanishads in Persian. So he has written two very interesting books, which are known as Sakinatul Awliya and Safinatul Awliya. In Sakinatul Awliya, he has written all the quotes of his spiritual sheikh. His spiritual sheikh's name is Hazrat Mian Mir Qadri. His holy shrine is also in Lahore only. So if Dara Shikoh was not executed here in India, in Delhi, he must have been buried in Lahore. But unfortunately, Aurangzeb executed him in Delhi, and he was buried in Humayun's tomb. But his wife's grave is also in Lahore, near to the Mian Mir shrine. So whatever Mian Mir Qadri taught him, he made a note of him. So that is how these type of person works. And in Safinatul Awliya, he has described more than 400 Sufi saints, their life, how they have worked. So these two are prince who belong to such a crown family, and he was very much focused on Sufism. So these type of books are now currently converted in English. First they were in Persian, now they were converted in Urdu. I have Urdu version in my mobile phone. But I'm looking forward someone to convert them to English. I hope someday it will be converted. Still, I haven't found that book. But Kashful Mahjoob I have found. I have Kashful Mahjoob in English.
So Dara Shikoh is a very interesting character in that sense. So everyone knows he was part of, let's say, this royal family, but so I'm not really sure about this. Maybe you can throw more light on this. So some say that he wasn't interested in, let's say, being the ruler. Some say that that's not the case. It's just that there was already a line in front of him, and there's always this thing that's talked about by historians, that if Dara Shikoh was emperor and not Jahangir or something like that.
Dara Shikoh was very near to his father, Shah Jahan, and Dara Shikoh was the elder son of Shah Jahan. So, and Aurangzeb was the third son of Shah Jahan, because they were four brothers. The eldest one was Dara Shikoh, and the second was Shah Shuja, third was Aurangzeb, and the fourth one was Murad Baksh. So Aurangzeb always think that his father was not loyal to him, Shah Jahan, because many things happened in his childhood. He thought that he's making disparities among his child, and he's giving more attention to Dara Shikoh. So a thing came in heart. Every child, if I talk about my family, if I had two brothers, and my father giving more attention to me, not my younger son, he will have something in his heart that he is not a good father. So that thing Aurangzeb came in his heart. So Dara Shikoh was a crown prince, but Dara Shikoh was having a spiritual thought of mind. So he usually visits the Sufi saints and also visits temples also. So that is why when he translated Upanishads, Dara Shikoh said he is not a Muslim because he is converting something else which is against the Islam. So there was the thought of ideological thought between these two. Aurangzeb is also known as a Zinda Pir because he was very much about the Islamic Shariat, what you call jurisprudence. He was very much focused, but Dara Shikoh was not that much. Dara Shikoh was also Sufi, but he was an open-minded guy. He visited Sufi saints, he visited Gurudwaras also. In fact, his spiritual sheikh, his name is Hazrat Mian Mir Qadri. Interesting fact I want to tell you right now. He has laid the foundation of Gurudwara Harminder Sahib Golden Temple. So see, he's a Sufi saint and he belongs to the religion of Islam. But the fifth Sikh Guru Arjan Dev, from Amritsar, he went to Lahore and invited Mian Mir Qadri, the spiritual master of Dara Shikoh, to come to Amritsar and lay the foundation of Harminder Sahib. He was the one who laid. That is why if you have any friend in Lahore who belongs to the religion of Sikhs, he always visits Mian Mir Qadri's shrine in Lahore. And they think Mian Mir Qadri is very, because he is having a very good relation with the fifth Sikh Guru Arjan Dev Ji. So you see, so how these people were very interconnected. So this is the thing I want to.
Do you get a lot of, let's say, because I'm not really aware of this, but do you get a lot of Sikh people who come to shrines in that sort because, let's say, there is, let's say, as you're mentioning, a history that's attached to it?
Sikh peoples basically those Sikh people who knows their history and they know whichever Guru has relation with any Sufi saint. If I talk about Guru Nanak Ji was very good admirer of Baba Farid. They visit Baba Farid shrine. And the fifth Sikh Guru, as I told, the relation Mian Mir Qadri, if they know that Sufi saint has a relation with any 10 Sikh Guru, they visit those places. They will definitely visit those places. If I talk about Nizamuddin, why don't they visit Nizamuddin Dargah, but their religion started way back, way after Nizamuddin Aulia died. Nizamuddin Aulia died in 1325 AD and Guru Nanak Ji was born in 1469 AD. So there is a huge gap between there. But when I'll talk about Mughal era, whoever Sufi saint is born have a very good relation with Gurus of these Gurus. So these Sikhs always visit those holy shrines. And in fact, they visit in Delhi also, the Nizamuddin area. If I'll talk about Nizamuddin, have you ever went to backside of Humayun's tomb? There's a Gurudwara.
Oh, okay. Because I went recently. I don't think I went to the backside.
There's a Gurudwara. I'm not forgetting the name of that Gurudwara. I'm not remembering that name. So just near to the Gurudwara is the Khanqa of Hazrat Nizamuddin Aulia. Just close. So the Gurudwara land was granted by for these Sufi person only in the place of Khanqa. So Khanqa and Gurudwara are just next to each other. So see how there are very much lovable harmony among these people. So the Gurudwara is built in 1700s AD and the Khanqa is from 1300s AD. 400 years difference between those eras.
So that's really interesting. Something I really wanted to talk to you about is that, so I go to, as I mentioned, I was talking to you this previous to we started here, that I go to university in the UK. So I have many Christian friends, Catholic friends there. And they say that in the time they've interacted to pastors there, the people who are at churches there, they talk about if you want to be a pastor, if you want to be working in this sort of religious studies, you have to be well versed with a certain amount of languages, be it Latin, be it a several other set of languages you have to be very well versed in. Is that similar in, let's say, Sufism, that you have to be very well versed with Persian? Because the idea coming from here is that I've seen a lot of text that is lost in translation. So when you translate Persian to Urdu or when you translate Urdu to English, there's a lot of things that becomes very difficult to translate, or often there isn't even a translation. Have you ever faced that when you're speaking to your Sufi master?
No, no, no. First of all, if your Sufi master is alive, so he must be knowing your language. First of all, there is no communication barrier among. The thing is that whatever he guides you, he guides that person in his dream only, basically, because there was a trend of Khanka earlier times. Khanka is the place where Sufi lives, and where all his students came, and he guides for them for 20 years, 30 years to work on this field only. So what currently the whatever spiritual master you will get, you will he must be knowing your language. You will not go here and there because he must be in your country. But the thing is that when you are finding that Sufi Sheikh, you must know that he is also a Sufi, and no one is greater than him for you. Not in fact, not your mother and father also, not your parents, because Sufi is the teacher of your, and teacher has a very important status in spirituality, in Sufism. So there is no barrier of language. I can say when you translate Persian to Urdu, there are some texts missing, but Sufis are those. If your spiritual master is really a Sufi, he will guide you. You don't have to go through any book or anything. He will just guide you. Do this thing, do that, do that, and he will guide you in a way of Sharia only. Sharia, the jurisprudence of Islamic law, and he will say that ultimate goal is to reach to God at anyhow. Yeah, that is why there are numerous branches in Sufism. Chishti, Qadris, Naqshband. These are the branches of Sufism. Ultimate destination is to reach to God, but different ways to interpretation, different ways to reach that person.
So we touched upon this briefly, like when Sufism actually came about in India in that sense, and even Delhi in some circuits. So so your book is titled The Lost Sufis of Delhi. So is it that, let's say, it wasn't accepted in the time it came in here, or was it just that
You are trying to say why they are discarded currently, forgotten. Yeah, the thing is that Sufism has two different attributes. When you enroll yourself in the path of spirituality, there are Sufis are of two types. First is the Majzoob Sufis. Majzoob Sufis are those who lost themselves in the friendship of God, and they will leave this temporary world and they will go in nearby forest to live in peace. So no one can distract them or disturb them while they are connected with their God. And another is the Salik Sufis. There are two concepts, Majzoob and Salik. Salik Sufis are those Sufis who do whatever God's work and whatever spiritual work they have to do, but they are in between us also. So the chances of a person enrolling this field is very much high that he will be a Majzoob. It's all upon the status. 90% of the chances become that a Sufi will become a Majzoob. If his soul is more to absorb the mystical knowledge of God, which is known as Ilm-e-Luduni. Ilm-e-Luduni, we called it as Ilm-e-Luduni. If he absorbs more, then he will become a Salik and he will live. That is why Hazrat Nizamuddin Awliya, Hazrat Khwaja Gharib Nawaz of Ajmer, they were the Salik Sufis. They live in between the communities and the civil societies, but they have done their work. And in my book, The Forgotten Sufis, you will find mostly the Majzoob Sufis. That is why their Sufi, after their death, their Sufi shrines were not so much friends. In fact, their Sufi shrines are under the custody of ASI, Archaeological Survey of India, because nobody knows that the person buried here is a Sufi. But you will find from the old history books, old historical records. From that I have written. So in my book, about 90% of the Sufi saints I have mentioned are the Majzoob Sufis.
Is the distinction only that one Sufi wants to get lost in the jungle and only concentrate on his preach to God, and the other is very happy to be amongst us, amongst the general public? Or are there more distinctions that are there between the two Sufis?
The distinction is that the Sufi has is all as Mazhub Sufi will always be in ecstasy. He will always Mazhub will always 24 hours he will be with the God, and Salik has a separate time with God. God is every time in his mind and heart, but the connection, the main bond connection happens at a specific time, mostly at night. Mostly, a Sufi, what my spiritual sheikh says, a Sufi sleeps only for 3 hours in a day, in 24 hours. 21 hours they will work, whatever they will do. If his Salik is doing worldly work also and his spiritual work also, and his Mazhub also only sleeps for 3 hours. 21 hours he is connected with God. So Mazhub Sufis are always connected with God, and the Salik Sufis have some schedule in their daily routine. So upon that they work.
That's very interesting. Is that based on, let's say, cultural and societal changes that's come about? So Salik Sufis have just thought it's better for them to work in this way, that they allot time in certain parts of the day?
It is chosen by the God only, that the person who is enrolling this field will become a Mazhub or will become a Salik. What happened? There is a 3 years course time in Sufism. When a new person enroll in this field, when 3 years pass, God says, God gives some mystical powers, some mystical. If he is satisfied with that mystical power, then he will become a Mazhub.
Is there one superior to the other, or you don't look at it in that way? That no.
No. I'm telling about the journey only. After 3 years, when God gives them power, if he is satisfied by that power only, he will become a Mazhub. If he wants more to absorb, more to get from, then he will be going toward the Salik. So if he got, okay, I have got this much, I am satisfied, then he will become a Mazhub and he will go to nearby forest for peace and live there. If he wants to become a Salik, he wants more. No, I haven't got anything. I want more God. I want more God. So that's how the period of Salik take 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. In fact, Salik positions are attained during the time of their death also. And Mazhub is very nearly only 3 years. If he focus on his spiritual duties, he will get the Mazhub rank. And after 3 years, the mystical power he gets is known as Kashful Kubur. So when you visit some holy shrine, you will see some person talks with the person buried there. So he has having the power of Kashful Kubur. He must be a Sufi, but he is not telling anybody that I am a Sufi. So Kashful Kubur is the first power that is granted to a Sufi. And the highest Kashf are the mystical powers. The highest Kashf is known as Kashf Shaksi. I have mentioned all this thing in my book. Kashful Shaksi is that power. He don't have to go anywhere. If he is sitting at this place, he will connect to anybody anywhere in the world. So these are the mystical powers of Sufis. So the Kashful Shaksi power is granted mostly to the Salik Sufis. That is why numerous occasions when you go to Ajmer Sharif Shrine during the time of Hajj. Hajj is the holy pilgrimage of Islam. Just the month of Hajj is going on. So you will ask some khadims, some caretaker. He will say Khaja Garib Nawaz is currently in Makkah. His soul is currently in Makkah because he is having the power of Kashful Shaksi. That is the reason.
Being a Hindu, I haven't really read up a lot about the Mecca. So what is so, let's say, mystical about that place? What is so, let's say, illuminating that every Muslim says that at one point in their life they have to visit Mecca?
Mecca is a very holy place for Muslims because it's a very old place. First of all, I want to say that Muslim offer prayers, their namaz, their prayers towards facing to Mecca only. Before Mecca, there was another place, Masjid-e-Aqsa. It's in Jerusalem. So it was first the Qibla of Muslims before Mecca. When Ibrahim, the Prophet Ibrahim built Mecca, and Prophet Ibrahim is very beloved to God. Allah, very beloved to Allah, because he has sacrificed his entire life for Allah. In fact, you must have known the incident of the Eid just now celebrated, the Eid ul Adha. It is because of Ibrahim only, Prophet Ibrahim only. He was going to sacrifice his son, but Allah has some other plans. He has sent it one sheep that he slaughtered there, and that's how the festival of Eid ul Adha started in Islam. So he got the order to build Makkah, and Prophet Ibrahim's era is about 1,000 years before Prophet Muhammad. And Prophet Muhammad is from the family of Hazrat Ibrahim only, the Prophet Ibrahim only. Prophet Ibrahim's son was Prophet Ibrahim has two sons, Ismail and Ishaq. From Ismail is the lineage of Prophet Muhammad. So that's why it was built by a prophet. So that's why it's very holy for a Muslim.
Um, so, um, I generally, it's really interesting listening to all this, because I generally haven't had a lot of experience in Sufism in that way. So something I wanted to ask when we were talking about, let's say, the two different types of Sufis. So because I've read through the Bhagavad Gita, and over there Krishna talks about this essence that everyone's motive in life should be to preach to God, but that shouldn't be that you leave all your responsibilities, you leave your family, you leave your loved ones, you leave everything, and you go just to the forest and meditate to reach to me or whatever. That those are called dhundis, is what he calls them. He says that there are a set of people, so he says that that's why I've put this system such as Brahmins and Banyas and all these things. So Brahmins, their whole essence is just to preach to God, and then Banyas, people have to do business, and Shudras, and this whole different system has been put in place. So I mean, I'm just trying to put forward is that there are a lot of similarities in that sense with different religions in reaching to God, however the case.
What you quoted the Lord Krishna's word, same thing my spiritual sheikh says to me. When we say, oh holy spiritual sheikh, I want to go and live my life in peace, no one could distract me. He said that you will not become a Sufi like that. You will go there, you will just roam here and there and come after some time. Nothing happened. A Sufi is real, is who in 3 years time, the starting stage, he has to live in between the community. Because the major examination is in living in between the community and sacrificing his desires. If he go to the forest and what sacrifice he has done? Nothing. No one is there to distract him or disturb him. Only animals or etc. So the main examination is to live in between the community, civil society, and just work for the spiritual path. Then only he can become a Mazoob Sufi also.
That's the same thing that's talked about the Bhagavad Gita. Like,
Yeah,
almost what
same thing. So that's why I said now my spiritual sheikh has said same thing to me. When he taught us about the spiritual journey.
So, in that sense, do you think that, so there's this one question that often comes to my mind is that, do you think that it's probably lesser in India in that sense, but more and more in USA, in the UK and other Western countries, that people are moving away from, let's say, religion as a construct, moving towards, let's say, atheism, or in a sense that they don't actually believe in a sort of God figure that there is. And that's led them to, let's say, do a lot of aspects that's come down to this aspect of nihilism, where they don't believe in anything in society, and they say that I don't have a point living because if there isn't a God, if there isn't someone, some higher being, then why am I even doing something? Why do I have to act morally? Why do I have to act ethically? And that's impacting them in, let's say, taking lives, raping, and all these other things that people associate. So do you believe that even if there is someone who is an atheist or doesn't believe in God, there is still a lot to be taken out from religion in that sense, in the good that it can do for humanity?
First of all, from my point of view, there is no one atheist.
Okay.
From my point of view, I'm not talking about anybody else. From my point of view, there is no one is atheist. In fact, you will go to an atheist, he say that I am atheist, but he's afraid from some spiritual, some power.
Right.
Power. He will be afraid. When you talk him, who is doing night and day, who is making sun out from the east and sunsetting it in the west. They will believe there is some supreme power who is doing this. The whole, there is a very famous शेर, कोई तो है जो निज़ाम हस्ती चला रहा है वही खुदा है. You have listened the song of Atif Aslam.
Right, yeah.
So whoever atheist I have met,
Yeah.
some point of view he will say that there is a God, there is a God. But whatever happening in the Western American side, I think because there is a lack of the spiritual teachers there, or you can say religious teachers. If there are religious teachers, they are having their own rigidness about no. If he will come to me, then only I will tell him. They are not going. In fact, everything is currently happening on money. When you go any religious teacher, he will ask you for the money. He will say, give me flight tickets, give me money to book some hotels for me and make a very good presence of me there. So that's thing everywhere happening currently. So who will talk about the real essence of God? So that's why in West this thing is deteriorating day by day by day.
Right. Do you think it comes under this, we will fall under this trap eventually, let's say the advancements we're doing in artificial intelligence and this aspects of advancements in science in general, that people are talking about this essence of eventually we will come to a point where we create this pill of an anti-aging pill so that no one can basically die in that sense and just stay in this, in the world we are in. Do you think, like, what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on, let's say, artificial intelligence and our advancements in science?
First of all, I don't think that every person has to all time live. From my point of view, it's a temporary world.
Yeah.
It will end someday.
Yeah.
It has to end someday because you see, every day, 1,000 childs are born and 1,000 people are dying. In Corona era, you can see. In India only, I think 6,000 people have died due to Corona, COVID pandemic. In the world, I think 6 lakh, 7 lakh people have died. So this where they are going. The reality is their souls are not from their body only. This is a temporary life where we are living. So whoever says that we have to live everywhere and this world is, so I don't think that he is telling the truth or he is saying that, because yes, you have your life, you have to live and you have to make it better. First of all, you have to make it better by having you have to do something that the world knows you. That Mahatma Gandhi did, Bhagat Singh did. Bhagat Singh was a Sikh, but because of what he has done in the Lahore Saunders case, he has to cut his hairs. So that is why we are remembering them. So this world is temporary. Do some extraordinary work in this world and just provide something good to the community. What I think, do something good to the community, whichever area of interest you belong. If you will do, public will remember you. So that's why if I'll talk about Madan Mohan Malviya. Madan Mohan Malviya established Banaras Hindu University. Still people are knowing him. But where he is right now, nobody knows where his soul is. We are knowing. No? Same like Sir Syed Ahmed Khan, he has built Aligarh Muslim University. He died in 1897 AD. Still his university is working on. So do some extraordinary work so that coming generations remember you.
So this aspect of legacy, do you think it's, as you mentioned, it's very important to you, but do you think it should be important to people in that sense?
The thing is that first of all, people should know the point of why they came to this world. What's the reason? God has sent us with some goals or some facts to achieve. But what I am seeing right now, that everywhere no one is bothered. They are just the main reason is currently is because of the addiction of those smokes and drugs. They are thinking this is the life. This is not the life. What they are doing, everywhere you will see that young youth used to smoke weed. So what is going on here? they are not getting the true meaning of life. God has sent us on this planet to live a life for 60 years, 70 years, and to achieve something, to do something, to make your soul pure. This body will not be there. What goes to him is our soul. It's us that we have to make our soul pure. That is why Sufi detached his soul from his mind and his body, because whatever evil thing is done by the body and soul, sorry, body and mind, yeah. But what will happen at the day of judgment? Soul will took the punishment, whatever thing will happen. So we have to get the meaning of this life. The meaning of this life is to do some extraordinary performance during your lifetime. What I think.
Do you think so? I've been fortunate enough to visit Turkey, and I'm forgetting his name, but as you know, there is famous Sufi dance that there is.
Raqs.
Drugs. So is that a way to, let's say, preach to God, or what is the essence of that?
This this way of style is allowed mostly in Silsila Chishti order of Sufism. The Silsila Chishti order of Sufism, they basically listen this sama, Qawwali, what you say, Qawwali Sufi music. So in Sufism, if a music connects you to the God, so it is 100% permissible. If the music which is taking you away from the God, that is haram in Sufism. So when Sufi music happens, when you see the raqs is going on, so these raqs were done by the original Sufis at those period. There was a Sufi, he's the founder of Silsila order of Chishti order of Sufism. His name is Khwaja Abu Ishaq Shami Chishti, and he was from Syria, and he came to Chisht. That is why from Chisht only the name Chishti came to this order. Chisht is a place in Afghanistan, just near to Herat. So what happened when he came to Herat first time? He was very much fond of listening Sama. So there, that time, entire Afghanistan was suffering from drought, sukha. So what happened? The king, there was a monarchy era. King came to him and said, "You came from Syria and you are very pious Sufi. Just make a dua that rain come." So he said that at night, make a program of Sama, Qawwali, and rain will come, rain will happen. But he had made one agreement that no one will sit with me in that Sama. Only the person who is offering, who is doing Sama will be there, and I will be listening. What happened when Sama started at night, in just like a room, a khanka, he started doing raqs, and entire night rain happened. And next day flood came in Afghanistan. And again that king came to him. What you have done? You have so he said, you have asked for the water. Entire night I have done raqs, and God has offered rain to them. So said, oh God, I should have said you limited rain, not that much. So see the spirituality of raqs. So that is why raqs, you can see raqs happen. But raqs is basically done by the original Sufis only. When raqs happen, they connect with the God. That's why you see in the movie Jodha Akbar, Khaja Mere Khaja. That was not a true, but when Hrithik Roshan was doing some light was, so that is felt by the original Sufis. But we people don't see that. So that's the importance of raqs in the Sufism, especially in the order of Chishti.
Why is it that raqs is so important? Why not some other dance form, or why not some other sort of music? Why is it this sort of music?
Because raqs is a dance of peace. It's a form of a peace dance when no one is etc. is disturbed. First of all, in Qawwali, the Qawwali was started because of there was an instrument known as duff. I don't know what we call duff in English. Duff, you have seen the movie Sholay?
Yeah.
There's a song Mehbooba, when a person is doing duff. So that was on the instrument which was used by the saints of 12th century. tough. When Amir Khusro came, so Amir Khusro brought another music system known as sitar. So from sitar, more musical instrument. So everything got permissed. But I said it should be in the sake of God only, not pursuing anybody else. So that's why in Rux also you will see no noise pollution happens. If in this room the Rux will happen, if the doors are closed, no one will listen. But I want to say that currently today people do on loudspeaker, which is not permissible.
This is very interesting.
Yeah.
Because I went to this place in Turkey and they had very stringent rules. Like,
Absolutely. Turkey is the land where Sufis belonged.
yeah,
So they are still now following that rituals.
it's very strange.
But when Sufism came to India, they converted to Sufism, but they didn't left their rituals. This is what my spiritual sheikh says. The Sufism is not in its exact form what it was in Central Asia.
Yeah.
For today, what happening? Sama will happen on loudspeakers like this. Entire noise pollution is happening everywhere.
This is very similar in Hindu tradition.
Yeah.
Have you seen the recent temple thing? They're singing, remixing Bollywood
Yeah,
music?
absolutely. So the song is for the person who is sitting there. He want to live. You have to don't show just like the laborers are working. They have interest. They are working. Why would they would like to listen? So it's for a separate people, for separate elite people, those who want to listen. But today on loudspeaker, these things having that is not permissible. I don't think in my Sufism that is not permissible. What modern days people are doing.
No, for sure. So this was a very interesting question I wanted to ask you. I think I missed it now. I'm probably going to ask you now. So is the idea that Sufism, as you mentioned, it originated in Turkey and Central Asia in that sense, but since it moved towards India, as you were mentioning, it did lose an aspect such as the tradition wasn't lived up to the standard it was before. But what other things do you think that were a part of Sufism in Turkey and Central Asia, but as it came to India, maybe because of whatever the reasons may be, why do you think that not every part of the tradition was lived up to?
First of all, here also I want to quote my spiritual sheikh.
Yeah.
Whatever I know
For sure,
because of
that's very
him only. My spiritual sheikh says in 12th century when Sufis came to Indian subcontinent because of the Mongols, aristocrats, Mongols attacks. So what happened? Because of their love, people accepted those saints. But there was a tradition of sadhu tradition in India.
Okay.
Sadhu tradition. They have converted to Sufism, but didn't left their rituals. So still, you will see today that something happens. Someone has done black magic on that guy. Black magic things are still going in India, which is total. From my point of view and my spiritual sheikh, that's absolutely wrong. There's nothing like black magic. But when some parent's child is not passing, he will go to some Baba and say, my child is failing in 10th standard exam, just pray that he will pass. If he will not work hard, how will he passing the 10th class exam?
Yeah.
So these type of things that was happening at that era still are continued by the people still following the Sufi way of peace. So that is the reason they have adapted Sufism but didn't left their rituals.
So I think, as you mentioned, it's very much similar now. Like even my mother, for that instance, if she has to look into the smallest of things, she'd want to go to a Baba, she'd want to go to a, let's say, Panditji and ask that is this the actual way to do things or something. I'm not totally against, let's say, if you may want to ask on a broader aspect of things, but not for the smallest of things. And as you mentioned, sometimes it comes down to this aspect of escaping from reality in that sense. So they go and have, let's say, have demands that are not even possible sometimes. So they might ask that, as you mentioned, a dumb kid to say that, oh, he has to pass and get to IIT or something like that. So then the question I have here is that, like, what do you think is the way that people can get away from that in society? Do you think that even is a way that people can, let's say, stop supporting these dhongi babas or these babas who aren't coming with anything credible?
First of all, there is a term which we currently is known as Andhbhakt. You cannot make them away from them because something Babas have done to them. They in Sufism also there are lots of pseudo Sufi Babas.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, in my Sufism I'm saying that, which I follow. In Sufism I'm saying that there are many fake Sufis who came to YouTube and say I am a very big Sufi and said I've said some few minutes ago that the Sufis are found on two lies only. So he's from the first branch. That he's nothing from inside, but he's saying I'm that much powerful and I can do this. And he's saying his ring. He's selling some ring. Take this ring for 12,000. You will get whatever you want. So these are all misconceptions. So currently these misconceptions are very difficult to be stopped because they are totally devoted to those Babas. If you say a single word for them, they will come on you on social media and they will attack you like this. No, you can't do. But if there is some educated person, you can guide them. Don't believe in this black magic. That are all given by the God only. And God in Sufism only, my spiritual sheikh says that din badalte hain. You understand? Din badalte hain. That good days will also come, bad days will all come. It just changes. On a person, every time there will be not a good days. Every time, bad days will also come. But that day will be not for all time. It will change in good days. So we have to believe that it's a life cycle. So that revolves in good days, bad days. God, there is bad days, like that.
That's very interesting. So some other thing that you actually do, so you were mentioning earlier, you founded this organization called Sehre Delhi. So, and then there are, let's say, historical sites that ruins around, let's say, talked about in the general media. Not many people visit those sites, and you are actually going to those places and aspects such as that. So something I really wanted to ask you is, so places like Mehrauli and things like that, which aren't, let's say, covered by the general media in that sense. Why do you think it's important to go to those places?
Because it's a part of our historical culture. What the government has done, they have selected only 4 UNESCO heritage sites for their source of income. There are a lot more in Delhi. Have you known about the historian named Rana Safi?
Yeah.
She has written the Forgotten Cities of Delhi. The forgotten cities are whatever places she has mentioned. I have took my guest to every place, whatever she has mentioned in that book. But she also came to know about these places by the heritage books only. But she has penned down those places. So today she, by the sake of God, she is doing very good, and she has done a very good thing. She has absolutely has done, because if she hadn't written that, the entire thing will be lost in a few days of time. Guarantee. Just go to the Kila Lal Kot. It's the first fort of Delhi. In fact, ASI hasn't put any board there. It's the first fort of Delhi. But I'm very thankful to Rana Safi ma'am that she has written that thing in her book, and people will know for many decades, coming decades. So that is why, for that motive also, I have written that Lost Sufis of Delhi. In my book, when you will go to the Lost Sufis, you will see the shrines which are half ruined, half broken. I think the skeletons will come out like that. There is a saint known as Sultan Bahu, very famous saint in Pakistan. He has written many books on Sufism, and his spiritual master's shrine is in Delhi, near Sadar Bazar railway station. You can imagine. And that shrine's terrace is of tin, and it will fall someday. And the grave is half ruined and half made by today's use of brick. So you say, and when you go to Sultan Bahu's shrine in Pakistan, more than 1,000 devotees visit every day at that shrine. So you can imagine, a saint's student is having so much reputation there, and in Delhi we have forgotten him. So that's why I plan to write about him, so people can go there. especially the Sufi. And that thing also, in terms of heritage, Rana Safi ma'am had did. I'm very much thankful to Rana Safi ma'am and many other people. William Dalrymple is also doing. Vikramjit Rupra has done for Bauli's. So these came in after 2010 only. Rana Safi ma'am have done in after 2010. Vikramjit Rupra had done, but William Dalrymple was here from 1983, and he has also done very good thing. He's written many books. Recently, Anarchy came, I think so.
So I think they're planning to do a Netflix series or a movie on Anarchy, like a Game of Thrones sort of setup. It's very big cars, big something like that they're trying to do. So yeah.
Anarchy is about I think East India Company.
Yeah.
I haven't read that book. It's a very lengthy book.
Yeah, it's on my reading list as well.
Ajay.
You talked about Rana Safi. I think I've written to her. So if you're watching that, please, I'd love to speak to you in person as well. But yeah, I think she's done a great job in talking about these facts. So I'm not sure if you know about this person, Krishnendu Bose. So he's a wildlife photographer, documentary person. He makes documentaries, and he talks about this aspect that we know of a few tiger sanctuaries in India, but there are several tiger sanctuaries who have a few tigers, but they aren't talked about because I think the government isn't putting control over them. And because of that, these tigers are moving into different villages close by. So there was this place, I'm forgetting the name now, I think Tadoba. Okay, so this place called Tadoba, and the tigers over there, they come out of the parks because what happens is that India as a government has done a good job in conserving tigers. The population of tigers has only increased in the last few years. And because of that, the tigers have to move out into other places and they're moving into these villages. And because it's not under the provision of the Indian government, they're not looking at these parks. So he's sort of saying, and I can link this to monuments and architectural facts in that sense. So as you mentioned, if it's under the ASI, then okay, they'll have this income coming in, this facilities that are looking into consideration. But if it's not, then as you mentioned, half ruins, skeletons coming out, and that's
more than 90% of Delhi's monuments are under the ASI only, but they are non-ticketed. But few monuments which are occupied by the local residents. Yeah. If you go to Nizamuddin Basti, there was one lady, one girl in my college only, Jamia Millia Islamia only. Yeah. She messaged me on Messenger, Facebook Messenger, that there is a doom came out of a house in Nizamuddin Basti. I said, whose doom is this? She has just find out about it. I have searched everywhere in internet, every source. I haven't found, but I only know that from that architect it was of Lodi era. Yeah. So there are numerous numerous monuments. When you go to Chirag Dilli village, you will find numerous monuments from Lodi era. Lodis have built many, especially Lodis and Tughlaqs. Yeah. They have built many numerous monuments in Delhi, but few have got the banner of came under the banner of ASI, and some are still discarded. They are occupied. There is a place in Mehroli where when I was doing my work of the law service of Delhi, I went for capturing the image of 40 Abdalon ki Mazar. 40 Abdalon ki Mazar, when I reached to, I captured the images of 40 Abdals buried there. Abdals are rank in Sufism. That's another topic. So when I captured, there just near to there was a heritage. So I see that heritage was closed from backside, and one AC's compressor was put in on it, and they have made that a room, the separate room. It's a government heritage, so nobody is claiming. I think I have that photo, and you can check my Instagram. Wow. I have put it that. Yeah, you can see I've just put it on Sarah Dilli's. So they have just painted that in green and yellow and put in one AC, and they made a room. They got a free place to live like a royal family. you just see. So there are numerous monuments here in Delhi. Yeah. So if ASI after the trend of Heritage Walk came, ASI had got a very difficult task, because everyone are complaining in social media. This place, so said, what we can do? Yeah. They are also very much fed up of heritage. So that is why right now the corona is very much, the era has gone. I pray that another circle didn't came from UP and Bihar, but currently UP and Bihar has lots of cases, but Delhi is stabilizing right now. So what ASI has done, that they have opened Qutub Minar Red Fort, but unnoticed monument they didn't. When you go to Jamali Kamali in Mehrauli, still they haven't opened because they had not getting any source. But we type of people want to take people to those places, but we have to wait. What we can do? So from 16th, I will start my heritage walks, and first we have heritage walk we have happening at Tughlakabad.
No, that's very interesting, and I think this is something I really wanted to ask you about, like Tughlakabad Fort. And I'd be interested if I have the time to come for your heritage walking. That is, so you mentioned, I think I read this article on a newspaper publication. They said that why is it cursed? Because you've put it out that Tughlakabad, the cursed fort in that sense. And there's a quote I picked up, Ya base ujad, ya rahe ujad. So just let's say
that's the story of a conflict between a Sufi saint and a sultan. Shall I tell you about the story about that curse? So what happened during 1321 till 1325 AD, Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq established a dynasty known as Tughlaq dynasty, and he shifted his capital from Siri to Tughlakabad. So he was constructing the Tughlakabad fort, and same time Nizamuddin Auliya, Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya was constructing his Bauli in Ghayaspur village. Nizamuddin Basti was earlier known as Ghayaspur village. So he asked for some labours from the Sultan. Please provide me some labour. So he said, I will not provide. So he said, just provide the labours at night. They will construct your fort in the morning, in the daytime, and my Bauli in the night. So he again disagreed. So what happened? Nizamuddin Auliya was having so much status in Delhi. What happened? Those labourers came secretly at night and started building the Bauli. So this message went to the fort, and Sultan Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq said, oh, he's going against my order. So what he has done, he has stopped the supply of oil. If there is no oil, how will the fire will be burned, and how will night without fire work will not happen. So Nizamuddin Auliya said, oh, he's becoming smart. Let me give him some lesson. So his spiritual disciple, his name is Hazrat Khwaja Nasiruddin Mahmud. His shrine is in Chiragh, Delhi. Very much famous shrine in Chiragh. He called him and said that go where the construction is happening and take a bowl, just like this bowl, and put some water on it and put some grass on it and just touch it, and it will be illuminated. So Hazrat Nasiruddin Mahmud went there, and he had followed the orders of his master, and same thing is done. When he touched that grass, the light came. It's a spiritual power, mystical power. So from that day only he got the title of Chiragh Delhi. That's why the area of Chiragh Delhi is named after that saint only. Hazrat Khwaja Nasiruddin Mahmud Roshne Chiragh Delhi. So this information went to Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. He said, oh, yes. So same time, what happened? A revolt occurred in Bengal. He went to stop the revolt there. He successfully stopped the revolt and sent a message to Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya, just leave Delhi, otherwise I will kill you. Whatever I will do with you, that will be on your own consequences. He said, okay. Then he echoed those words. That first of all he said that word, Hunus Dilli Durast. Abhi Dilli Dur hai. The famous dialogue. And what happened when he was coming to Delhi, on the way to Delhi, there's a place known as Manikpur near Allahabad, Prayagraj. So there a massive parade happened there of elephant. So when elephant started doing the parade, a shivering happened and the entire tent fell on his head and he died. He never reached Delhi alive, Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. And for that fort he occurred that he has having so much greed for this fort. So he said, Rahe ujad ya base kuchar. Still half of the fort is abandoned and half is occupied by the community of Gujars. So every word of Nizamuddin Auliya became truth.
why is half the fort like still left? Why aren't people what like?
Because
There been some cases.
because of the structures now. Yes, I occupied those structures, and because the fort is about 6.9 kilometers in the range. Just imagine. So there is a colony known as Tara apartment just behind. So that's on all the land of the fort land only. And there is a school also, Kendriya Vidyalaya, established on the land of that fort only. So only 10% is what is accessible for us to visit. So just 90% are taken by the people.
And is the ASI doing anything about it? Like, have they spoken to them?
They can't do anything na right now, because half of the Delhi established upon unauthorized land. Many places you will see half of the Delhi is on unauthorized land. When you go to Sangam Vihar area, when you go Tughalkabad, entire Tughalkabad is upon the Tughalkabad fort land. It's a ASI property, but they will not give, because they have occupied during the time of Britishers only those places.
I mean, is there anything else you want to share? Because that's the sort of question I had in mind. But any other experience maybe you had on a heritage walk, which is something you can't, let's say, you can't forget, something that you have to get out of the public. I don't know.
In heritage walk is a very difficult task to do, because there are lots of different mind people comes to the walk, belonging from different ideologies. When you talk about, when you are telling about the Delhi Sun, they will know why you are not talking about the Hindu rulers. How can I tell them about the Hindu rulers? Because there is no story of them in those era. So tackling them is a very difficult. I have faced many situations in that. So first of all, I want to say that when the person who is having any ideology coming should have seen the topic of the walk. On what topic we will talk. If we are going to Tughalkabad, how can I talk about Prithviraj Chauhan? There is no relevance of Prithviraj Chauhan. You should come to the Kila Rai Pithoda or Kila Lalkot, then only I will tell you about Prithviraj Chauhan. So I have faced many ideological barriers and radical ideological attacks on me because of these. But from my point of view, I am not any pro Delhi Sultanate or whatever I have read in history, I only tell about that place only. So I take walks on some special purposes. There is a festival known as Basant of Nizamuddin Dargah. I have took many people for showing them the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb. So our main focus for heritage walk is to showing the heritage, the discarded heritage, and about the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, which was before 1857, revolt of 1857. So my heritage motive is only on these principles of mine.
When you interact with, let's say, people of differing ideologies, how do you, let's say, tackle that? What do you say when someone...
I simply say that, sir, today the topic is not there. If you don't have interest, you can attend or you can leave, because today is the topic of that person. I will tell you about that. You want to listen about that person, just come to that place. Whenever I will have an event, you are most welcome. So just I have to say this thing only. Some says that, oh, he is like this. So what can I do, man? The topic of that work. If I will tell in Tughalkabad or Prithviraj Chauhan, what other people will do? What he's telling, is he out of his mind? So we have to face. But these things happens occasionally, not oftenly, because I'm about in October 2 years. 2 years. The second anniversary of my Sahara Delhi is in October. I have faced many situations, but the crowd right now is coming. They know me. In fact, before lockdown, I took my crowd to Panipat also, out of Delhi. And they came to me because I have won their whatever you can say. They know me very well. I know them. So as soon as I have put in my event of Panipat, soon they started registering my bookings. and 15 to 17 people went with me to Panipat. It's a 1 day trip. It's a very good trip, and we were having a trip of Sarhind also. Sarhind has also lots of these type of heritage. So unfortunately, when that time riots happened in Delhi, then Corona came. So Sarhind still is not fulfilled, and we are planning to do next year. But hope I will take once again to Panipat. Then Panipat has, three battles happened there, and there are some few heritage. So that's how Sare Delhi's experience has happened till now.
So is it only you? So you have this whole set of people who come with you, or do you have, let's say, a team with you?
I have only two. Me and my friend Aman started this.
Right.
We have team members, but like a volunteer only.
Okay.
Some I have my DSLR camera. I give to somebody, just capture image. You should go online on social media handle to put status that the walk is on. That's only. And the crowd is upon our whatever the goodwill we have made in the market
Right.
in the span of 1 year 8 months time.
Is there, let's say, a pushback from the ASI to say that why are you taking them to these places, or why are you trying to make money from this, or why aren't you pushing, let's say, the recognized places? Have you faced something like that?
On only the ticketed monuments which are UNESCO World Heritage Site, because they have some some ASI guides which are very old age people, 50 60 years old. They tell about this person has built this person built this, know about the primary source, so they disturb. But on the unnoticed non-ticketed monument no one disturbs. But that is why we recommend mostly the unnoticed heritage, because there is no one comes there and no one is there to disturb. Only the people who smokes or drink that come there. But when they see crowds, they go from there. They say we'll come at night.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So when you talk about these things, that there are older people, mass tour guides who want you to assist you. So is there, let's say, you say they don't mention primary sources and that stuff. So do they, let's say, muggle up history? So they say whatever fancies them?
Whatever they say about the NCRT language, in NCRT what you will find, his son was his son was his son was that. Timeline. Taj Mahal was built by Shah Jahan. Humayun's tomb was built by Gigi Anga, etc., etc. And Akbar's tomb was in Sikandra. They will tell like this, and they will not tell what was the reason why they have built that. Whatever personality is buried there. What was the story? Where the architecture was taken from? They will not tell anything. They will tell the bookish language of NCRT, not like the Forgotten Cities. If they have studied Forgotten Cities of Delhi by Rana Safi ma'am, they have told many words, but they have same knowledge of book. They will go to the 8th, 9th, 10th standard book. Oh, this thing. Okay, that's efficient to tell.
So I think you mentioned this on several interviews and several newspaper articles that you're not a historian, you're not studied as a historian. So what you try to do is you only try to put forward what other people have said, and as you mentioned, that's why you put primary sources there. So how important do you feel that is, like, not to just say something that will get crowds, but to say what actually happened there?
Yeah. So what happened that these primary sources are you can take from some old age people, because their grandfathers, their father have told them older history. They will tell. There are numerous stories. There are numerous stories on Tughlaqabad which I will be telling on 16th August.
Wow.
How Alauddin Khilji defeated the king of Chittor. In the movie Padmavat, what he has shown, that he has came and he has by betrayal he has defeated Maharaval Ratan Singh. But there is a very important story which no one says or tells. It's a story of a Sufi saint behind that victory.
What is it, if you would be happy to say right now?
That's a long story, but
go ahead.
Okay, I will tell you. There is a Sufi saint known as Hazrat Shamsuddin Turk Panipati. His shrine is in Panipat.
Okay.
When we went to Panipat, we have taken our guests to the Panipat his shrine. I told them stories of that. So he was a Salik Sufi, not a Mazdu, and he was working under the army of Alauddin Khilji. And somebody told Alauddin Khilji that there is a Sufi saint in your army, and if he will suggest you, you will win Chittor. So what happened? One day, you understand khema?
No.
Khema are the small tents on a open land.
Okay.
Tents.
Yeah.
So what happened? A thunderstorm came that night, and every tent broken, but one tent didn't broke of that saint because he was worshipping. He was connected with the god. So Alauddin Khilji got to know that he is the saint. So he came and he said, "Sir, I didn't recognize you that you are a Sufi saint. Just tell me how I will win Chittor." So that's how he said that just you do this, you will win.
What did he say?
I don't know that thing, but it's a very important primary source thing. He has guided him some thing about artilleries or something. I don't know about exact that thing. So that's how he has guided him. He easily defeated Maharaja Ratan Singh in Chittor in 1333 AD. But what his spiritual master is Alauddin Ali Ahmad Sabir Kaliyari. His shrine is in Kaliyar near Roorkee, Uttarakhand. He said, whenever you will have a monarch in your life, that day will be the last day of my life. But by mistake he has guided him, he helped him. So what happened? Same day his spiritual sheikh died and he resigned from the army of Alauddin Khilji. That I will not do your work because of your you understand, lalach, greed. Because your greed, I have lost my spiritual master. And why I have told you about that? How will you? You should have. तुम्हें अपनी मेहनत करके उसे जीतना चाहिए था. I should have not told you. So for that guilt, he has resigned and went to his spiritual master shrine in Kaliyar. But later on, he went to Panipat and he died there in Panipat only.
So when he told Alauddin Khilji about these outlays and this formation, so how did he get to know about this? Did he?
Spiritual power.
So was it something that the spiritual power told him that they looked into the future and say that this is how it would play out, or was it that they studied how they played?
No, they are the friends of God now. They have done those hard work in the interim period of time. So what happened? That is why you said that Sufi says कि what will happen next. रहे उजड़ बसे गुजर. He was knowing ना कि रहे उजड़ या बसे गुजर. So that also God has granted that if Alauddin Khilji will do this, he will defeat him. In fact, Alauddin Khilji is credited for defeating Mongols. It is said that Nizamuddin Aulia has blessed Alauddin Khilji that he will defeat Mongols. Otherwise, Alauddin Khilji was not having that much power. You just there's a series going on known as Artagal currently. They release Artagal. Just go to that series, you see how notorious the Mongols were.
This is on what?
You can watch on YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, the 5 season. It's a history of Central Asia only. And there was an empire known as the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire founder was Usman. Usman's father was Artagal. Artagal stories is about in that drama. So in that series, it is shown that how notorious the Mongols were. In fact, Mongols were not very much notorious, but Alauddin Khilji successfully defeated them, and he has cutted 8,000 heads of those Mongols and buried under the base of Siri Fort. That is why Siri Fort is known as Siri. Siri means head, sir.
Wow. So the representation in Padmavat is actually, do you think that's actually like how Alauddin Khilji actually was, or have they missed stuff?
That's a fiction.
In what way?
In what way is that the story of Padmavat is written by Malik Muhammad Jaisi, and Malik Muhammad Jaisi was during the Mughal era. He has not seen the era of Alauddin Khilji. Or by the way, in the authentic historical record, I haven't find anybody named by Padmavat. Maharaval Ratan Singh was there. He has defeated, but it's a now it has become a belief more than a reality. So whether I think I should not debate on that thing, but in historical record, what I have found that there was no one known as Padma, but it was a fiction story written by Malik Muhammad Jaisi in 1500s era.
I think that's a great way to end the show today. I'm really happy to have spoken to you. There's a lot I've learned about Sufism and Hegel works. I just hope I am able to make it to one of your Hegel works.
Absolutely.
But anything for the viewers where they can find your work, your social media, and most importantly, where can they buy your book?
My book from tomorrow, my book is available in both format, ebook or Kindle variant, whichever they can prefer. You can buy from they can buy from Amazon, Flipkart, Orange Bookstore. It's the name of my publisher, Orange Books. They can buy. I have written it with my great effort in the lockdown era because my research I have researched it in 1.5 years. So I wish that people will buy it. And the main motive of writing that book is to, after reading the book, they should visit those shrines who have interest in Sufism and visiting Sufi shrines. Because if they will not go in 10 years time, these places will vanish. So that's my motive. So in my book, I have written something about Sufism. What is my experience, what I know from my spiritual check, and there are numerous stories of different Sufi saints with the context of spiritual, regional, and political lessons. So on these three things only my book is based upon. So they can buy from Amazon, Flipkart, in both Kindle or paperback version.
Great. Is there something you're currently working on? Another book maybe?
I'm planning to do, but it's a secret right now because unless I have not written, it will be taken by somebody else. So it should be a secret. When I will write and I will send to the publisher. Then I will tell all.
I hope I can speak to you when you release your next book. But this was really fun, Yusuf. I hope we can do sometime again. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to coming here and you took my podcast interview. I'm very much grateful to you, and I hope I will come again in future nearby time.
I'd love to have you on.
Sure.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Syed Yusuf Shahab, do consider buying his book, The Lost Sufis of Delhi, which is available to be purchased via Amazon, following him on his social media and reading up about him through the links that are attached in the show notes. Moreover, if you want to follow me and my work, do consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, dropping a review/rating on Apple Podcasts. It helps the audience grow larger. Following me on my social media handles, my Instagram handle at Ishan Agarwal _, my Twitter handle at Agarwal Ishan _, my website/blog ishanagarwal.net. I would also like to thank Nandini Agarwal for the thumbnail artwork. And you could follow her on her Instagram, Nandini Studio. Thank you once again, and there's just something I'd like to leave you with, which is that learn something new every day. And yeah, that's the message I'd like to leave you guys with. Until then, bye.